last time we stopped at just writing out the full Hamiltonian of the hydrogen molecule without using the orbital approximation, but using the Born-Oppenheimer approximation. Now if I calculate the energy using the ground state, okay. So here I have the ground state. So if I take phi hydrogen ground state, H hydrogen molecule Hamiltonian, and phi ground state H2, then I will get something interesting, that is the electron repulsion integral will contribute to the energy through these integrals, okay. I will write down the integrals through the integrals integral phi 1s r1 star phi 1s r2 star e squared upon r12 phi 1s 1 r1 phi 1s 2 r2 d cubed r1 d cubed r2, okay. So this it will contribute always independent of the spin of the electrons 1 and 2. So this contribution does not depend upon the spins of the electron. Electron spins, and this is also called the Coulomb repulsion integral. We call it U. So U is a Coulomb repulsion integral. When both electrons are on the same atom. Now you see the wave function for all distances. The wave function for all distances is just a resonance of H1 plus H2 minus plus H1 minus times H2 plus twice HH. So no matter, even if R tends to infinity, the first two wave functions, the first two states have the same contribution. That means the ionic states always contribute equal amount to the covalent state. So HH I call it, this I call it the covalent state, and these two I call ionic states. So you see that the ionic states and covalent states have equal contribution. This is the problem with the molecular orbital picture. This has been discussed probably even in elementary courses on quantum chemistry. So because of this, even at R tending to infinity, the binding energy will not go to 0. So what you really require is a configuration which is the wave function which is slightly different, which involves configuration interaction. For example, the one that we will require is a wave function, trial wave function. I can just write down a simple trial wave function, which is actually C1 times HH, which is a covalent contribution, plus C2 times H plus H minus plus C3 times H minus H plus. And in this case, supposing you minimize the expectation value of energy using this trial wave function, then C1, C2 and C3 will depend on distance and C1 and C2 will go to 0. Or tends to infinity. So, you have to do configuration interaction and you have to take into account the electron repulsions if you want to dissociate the hydrogen molecule correctly. So, the moral of the story is, even for a simple system, like hydrogen molecule, electron repulsions which are explicit repulsions cannot be ignored. Now, this is as far as molecule goes. Now, let us see what happens in the case of metals. Okay, consider a metal and I will ask a different question. The question that I am going to ask is the following, that is, I consider the case of sodium. So, sodium is a body centered cubic metal and sodium distance is 3.7 angstroms. Nearest neighbor sodium distance is 3.7 angstroms, and I can write down the lattice in the following fashion. Everybody knows sodium is metallic. So, this is 3.7 angstroms. Now, I ask the following hypothetical question. Supposing I increase the distance between the sodium atoms to say 5 angstroms or 5.5 angstroms. Okay, then what happens is I have sodium atoms in an expanded lattice . The question that one asks is, will sodium continue to be a metal? Even when the lattice is expanded by 1.5 times. So, this one I have taken to be 5.5 angstroms, let us say. Now, what the band theory tells is the following. Band theory tells, yes, it should be a metal as the band is half filled. So, any partly filled band is a metal. So, in this case the band is half filled. So, it should be metal. But what does common sense say? No, because the distance is too large for the electrons to hop. So, you would imagine that the wave functions do not overlap so much, and so it should not lead to conduction. Well, how do you resolve this issue? To resolve this issue, let us consider the following. So, when I look at the sodium atom, so I can think of covalent structures. Sodium atom is a nuclear core of Z equal to 11 atomic number nucleus plus 10 electrons, which is that of neon and a valence electron. So I can represent the core by just a small dot like that, and then I can say that there is an electron here, and the electron let me represent by a different color, a blue dot. Okay. Now let me construct a lattice of this one. So supposing all the sodium atoms are neutral in the solid, okay, then if I construct a lattice, it will look like this. So and now I have the core there, then I have the valence electron in the outer ring. This is schematic because there is no orbit in quantum mechanics, it is all orbitals. And each one has one electron. Okay, so all sodium atoms neutral, and we have covalent structure. The question is, can it conduct electricity? If the ground state is completely made up of neutral atoms, then it cannot conduct electricity, because to conduct electricity an electron has to hop from one side to the other. So which means that this will become sodium plus and this will become sodium minus, and so unless the ground state has an admixture of ionic configurations, it cannot conduct electricity. If it is only covalent, that is all the sodium atoms are neutral in the ground state, then at T equal to 0 Kelvin you are not going to be having any electrical conduction. So for electrical conduction in the ground state, that is at T equal to 0, what you really require are configurations which are ionic. So let me draw the one configuration which is ionic. So let me write down the orbitals, and now some of them will have 2 electrons and some of them will have 1 electron. So let us assume that this has 1 electron, this has 2 electrons, the next one has none, this has 1 electron, this has 1 electron. So let us assume that this has 2 electrons, this has none, and this is neutral, and this is also neutral, and let us assume that this has I have 2 electrons in each, so now this must be also neutral, otherwise charge neutrality won't be there. So let us assume that this has got 2, 1, 0, so if you have configurations like that, so for example here you will see that this is a sodium minus, whereas this is a sodium plus. Similarly here I have a sodium minus, a sodium plus, and in this row I have a sodium plus and a sodium minus. So given this, if we have these configurations are required in the ground state, are required to make the system metallic. So let us see what is the energy cost. The energy cost of creating a sodium plus and a sodium minus from two neutral sodium atoms, that is Na plus Na giving you Na plus Na minus, is energy required is equal to ionization potential minus electron affinity. Okay. IP is ionization potential, EA is electron affinity. Now, this is usually large. For isolated atoms. That is why even if you have two sodium atoms in proximity, they will still be neutral and very little of sodium plus and sodium minus will be formed. Now, what we need to know is the following, that is, if the orbitals overlap sufficiently, then liberating the valence electron or equivalent to breaking the exciton, because a neutral sodium is like an exciton with a positive core binding the negative electron. So, it is an electron hole pair, you can say. So, this will reduce as the free electron will screen the interactions. That is, a liberated electron can screen the electron hole interaction. That is the sodium plus and electron interaction, which is the electron hole interaction, and weaken the exciton binding energy. Weaken the exciton or reduce its binding energy. So, if this happens, then this happens if the orbitals overlap. So, if we bring the atoms close enough, then screening will be strong and break the exciton. Let us see how strong it will be. Okay. So, we know that the screen, we already did this calculation before, and we know that the screen potential of a charge is given by V of r is equal to E squared by r e to the minus lambda r, where 1 by lambda is known as the d by Hückel screening length. It is a terminology borrowed from electrochemistry. And we calculated, we showed what lambda r was. Lambda squared we said was equal to 4 pi e squared times n of EF, where EF is a Fermi energy, and EF is equal to n of EF is actually 3 by 2 the density of states at the Fermi surface is 3 by 2 times n by EF. This is an expression that we derived earlier in the free electron context, and we know that EF is equal to h cross squared kF squared by 2m, and kF is equal to 3 pi squared n to the power 1/3. So, if you plug in all these numbers, then what you get for lambda is lambda squared is the following. So, lambda squared will be given by 4 pi Ne squared times n to the power 1/3 divided by h cross squared. Okay, so now let me be careful, this is not n times E, but this is no 4 me squared, not 4 pi a. Okay, there is no pi. For me squared n to the power 1/3 divided by h cross squared. Well, we know, for example, the Bohr radius of the hydrogen atom AH is given by h cross squared by me squared. AH is given by h cross squared by me squared. So, I can write down, so lambda squared is actually equal to n to the power 1/3 divided by 4AH. Okay, and this should be, so this is lambda squared, or 1 upon lambda squared is equal to 4AH by n to the power 1/3. And see, if lambda, now let me come back to the following, that is, if lambda, the screening length, is smaller than the Bohr radius AH, okay, then exciton cannot be formed. This is just a thumb rule, this is empirical, simply because the potential due to the positive core is completely screened off at kind of distance like 3AH or so, you will not have the 3s electron getting bound to the core. So, the binding energy will be very, very weak, and you can say that there is no binding. So, which means that if 1 by lambda squared is less than AH squared, okay, because 1 by lambda is the screening length, 1 by lambda squared is less than AH squared, then exciton cannot be bound. So, for this to happen, what we are saying is 4AH by n to the 1/3 must be less than AH squared. I think I made a mistake, it is AH by 4. Four goes in the numerator if I am right. Or we have n to the minus 1/3 less than 4AH, then exciton is not bound. N is the electron density in the system, that is equal to total number of electrons divided by volume. So, if we reduce the volume sufficiently, then n to the minus 1/3 will be less than 4 Ah. So, we see that this explains why sodium is a metal when sodium distance is 3.7 angstroms, but cannot be a metal at much larger internuclear distances, at much larger sodium distance. Notice one thing, that this argument is exactly like the argument in the hydrogen molecule. So, what was happening in the hydrogen molecule has been just carried over to sodium. There U which was the electron repulsion was necessary to make sure that at r tending to infinity the binding energy goes to 0, because you wanted to make sure that the ionic contributions become weaker. And in the case of sodium, you want the ionic contributions to be large enough in number, or U to be small enough, or U is screened very well. It requires a dense electron gas, which means that if you apply pressure, the density of the electron gas will increase, and so the screening lengths will reduce, and so the exciton cannot be bound. So, it is exactly the same physics as in the hydrogen molecule case. That is the reason why I dealt with the hydrogen molecule case. So, you see that in this case the sodium is going to be a metal, because the density of the electrons is large enough that n to the minus 1/3 is less than 4 times the Bohr radius. So, what it means is that if we take an insulator and squeeze it, you apply pressure, then it should become a metal. That is, insulator, if you apply pressure, should become a metal, and this is known as a metal insulator transition, or the Mott-Hubbard transition. So, application of pressure on an insulator should result in a metal, and that is what the Mott-Hubbard transition predicts. So, we came across similar metal insulator transitions earlier. For example, in the case of one electron picture, if you have a piles kind of instability, then a metal becomes an insulator. So, that was what we saw in one dimensional chains. It is unconditional, and in the higher dimensions it depends upon the nesting of the Fermi surfaces. Similarly, we also saw a metal insulator transition in disordered systems, where in disordered systems the filling of the band goes beyond the mobility edge, then and towards the center of the band for intermediate strengths of disorder, then it can become a metal. But as you increase the strength of the disorder, all the states in the band get localized, and so a metal can become an insulator by disordering, by creating a disorder. So, this is another way of obtaining a metal insulator transition, and let us see whether there are any examples. There are only indirect evidence, there are no direct examples, indirect evidence. For example, you take V2O3, okay, above room temperature, it is a metal, and on cooling it becomes an insulator. So, this is the fact when under ambient pressure. So, this temperature, let me call the metal insulator transition temperature TMI, okay, at 0 pressure. Okay. Now, if we apply pressure, then the distance between ions will reduce, right, because of squeezing. So, what happens is the metal insulator transition temperature under pressure becomes higher. Let us see the logic for this. So, what has happened is that since you have squeezed, you are keeping it under pressure, it requires much higher temperatures to actually push the ions apart and create exciton binding, because when you push the ions apart, the screening is reduced, and so you will have exciton binding. So, it becomes higher, and this is the evidence for Mott-Hubbard transition. So, similar evidence is obtained by actually doping the system with chromium. When you dope the system with chromium, chromium has got a smaller ionic radius, simply because chromium comes to the right of vanadium in the periodic table. So, there is a transition metal contraction, okay, transition metal ion contraction, and so the radius of the chromium 3 plus ion is smaller than the radius of vanadium 3 plus, and when you replace vanadium 3 plus by chromium 3 plus, the lattice shrinks, and you will see that the metal insulation transition temperature varying just the way it varies with pressure, and this is for very small range of chromium doping, which is between about 0.5% to 1.7% chromium doping. You will see that. So, this is also seen in chromium 3 plus doped V2O3 systems. Okay, so here chromium doping contracts the lattice. So, this system behaves like a system under higher pressure, a V2O3 system under high pressure. So far we discussed the Mott-Hubbard transition and gave examples, indirect evidence for that one, and showed the importance of electron correlations. So, what I will do in the next lecture is to discuss what happens to the electronic states when you have electron correlations, and discuss a little bit about the results of the Hubbard model, and then I will go on to discuss some things which are beyond the Hubbard model, again but model Hamiltonians, and which are applicable to insulators, and there we will see what kind of electronic states occur inside the band gap and why they are important. Thank you very much.